Johnson here, the On the Mic podcast, and I'm super excited to talk to my next guest because first time talking to him, and at my first PFL event, he is the voice behind the PFL. He's a man who does it all. He is the one and only Andy Shepard. Sir, welcome. Good to talk to you. Rather than have nerves like the first time when I met you in the hotel lobby, which we were just talking off camera, you're actually the second cage announcer that I've met at a hotel lobby. The other being Bruce Buffer. And I had the
Oh,
same anxiety for both of you guys. I was like, I don't want to do it. I was like, I don't want to do it.
I'm sure it's probably a little higher for old Brucey. How was your experience with Bruce? He's a legend, isn't
Fantastic. Yeah, it's literally same with you. Just open, easy to talk to. The only difference between when I met you, you were with our good friend Brett Okamoto, who kind of made the introduction a little easier. Like no one was around with Bruce except drunk people. So this guy was like, Bruce, I was in Vegas one time and you were on the elevator. And Bruce is like, cool, man. Like me and this guy were talking. So I just took a step back and Bruce was like, hey, that's like really basically noble of you. Like you could have gotten mad, you could have walked away, but you just like this guy. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, I shouldn't be talking to you in the first place. I was like, but this is like back in 2016. And yeah, so I'm hoping my interaction with you in the hotel lobby turns into the friendship I've had with Bruce for the last few years. So
it? I'm sure it was. It was great to meet you. It was great to meet you a few weeks ago, that one. And that was your first PFL event. So, mate, welcome. Welcome to the PFL circus. How did you enjoy it?
honestly, I loved it. And, we'll talk a lot about the PFL, and I've had plenty of questions about the PFL for you, but I loved it because not only it's different with the league format and the regular season and all of that, but like the smaller venues just make sense for PFL. They just make sense. People can say whatever they want, and there's always going to be critics. I was thinking about this a lot before this morning, before we got on here, and it's people are going to hate what they don't know, what they're unfamiliar with. And that's why I feel, especially on social media, there's so much criticism. But how smart is it to bring the PFL to Salt Lake City, where there's not enough MMA shows in a great town, and you bring Clay Collard in the main event?
Yeah, look, the people behind PFL are super smart. That's one thing I've realized sort of coming into that organization. I've been working with them in some capacity for I think close to 2 years now. And the first thing I realized is everyone they've signed up is top notch. And look, as this is still a brand, an organization that is in a growth era, and um yeah, it's good now that they're in these smaller venues and that you get to come and watch these fights and you get to see them close up. Because I honestly think it could be a year, 2 years, 3 years, that's rarely going to happen because these guys are growing so much. I mean, if you look at what PFL Europe have done, I mean, some of the venues we've had, particularly in France, man, these are 16,000 seat arenas and they are packed out. I think that's a sign of what's to come globally around all of these brands. So, hey, look, if you're watching this, you haven't been to a PFL event, if they come near you, I'd get there now because you're going to get nice, you're going to get up close seats, and it may be in a matter of time until those same seats are right at the back of a huge arena.
And it's almost in a weird way, and this is not a disrespectful thing to say, right? But it's like going to a high level major professional fighters league, right? Like one of the big MMA organizations, but a regional show feel at these smaller venues. You're on top of the action. You're seeing everything. You're hearing everything. In Salt Lake City, right outside the media room was the Bud Light Lounge. So you had fans all night long just going to their seats, interacting with fighters. You're like you said, you're not going to get that. Other organizations who we will not name, they kick their fighters out after the fight. They're like, all right, thanks for showing up, But before we get into the PFL, I just want to kind of talk to you about you because you've done so much. You've been in boxing, and I had to ask you about the boxing hot topic in a second. But boxing, WWE, now PFL, putting you on the spot. What do you enjoy the most?
Um, I think, look, first and foremost, I get enjoyment out of everything I do. I'm so lucky to be doing the work I do. First and foremost, though, man, like I grew up a wrestling guy. I was a pro wrestling guy growing up. Shawn Michaels is a guy that changed my life and ended up being, in a way, my boss at NXT. To be around those guys is amazing, and I think all of these sports, the more time you spend around them, the more you see it. This might sound a bit stupid, but like they're art forms. They really are art forms. Mixed martial arts, boxing, pro wrestling, whatever. And with pro wrestling, it's physical theater. You know, you need all the skill set, the resilience, the athleticism of any other sport, any other combat sport period. But then you got to tell stories in there. So I have so much respect for all these athletes, but seeing how pro wrestlers have to put things together and tell stories and the risk they take night in, night out, that's, you know, when you grow up with something in your heart, it's always going to have that place. But I've worked in MMA now for, man, I think nearly 10 years. Started off with Bama here in the UK and grew through that. And I do a lot of work behind the scenes with MMA, with, you know, with UFC in the past, with other organizations as well. So that's something that's ingrained into my world. And I know you get a different kick out of all of them. You really do. But man, working with the PFL, I love it. I love it. I think particularly because the guys I get to hang out with, you met them. You know, you got
Yeah.
Okamoto,
Yeah.
you got Sean, you got Randy, you got Dan Hardy, you got Tyrone, all those guys who are in that place that I get to hang out with. It's just a laugh the entire time.
Yeah, and it's great people involved in great business. Now, you're also in the boxing world, and I'm going to slowly transition into this because I think this will be the only negative part of this entire conversation. But you've been around like the boxing world. You've been around some of the greatest in boxing, but you also been on the social influence side of boxing. And I've got my own personal thoughts on it, and they're not all nice. So I'll leave those to myself. But as someone who's been around combat sports for so long, this side of boxing is relatively important. Would you agree?
Well, the influencer stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I think there's certainly a place for it. And I think first and foremost, what we do is entertainment. People tune in, people pay money. There are these industries there, be it MMA, boxing, pro wrestling, whatever. They're there as forms of entertainment. Otherwise, they'd be in the back of a barnyard somewhere, no one's watching them. So I think if people are entertained by it, then there's certainly a place for it. And I think with the influencer boxing, a lot of people hate on it because of the skill level and potentially because these guys are getting such exposure that other conventional boxers aren't getting, even though their skill set is arguably much better. But for me, I think if it's opening eyes to the sport and bringing a new generation and inspiring people to either get involved in the sport or find out more about the sport and get into it, I think there's a place for it, certainly. And, you know, again, I've worked in the influencer boxing scene, and man, like those guys, some of them, a lot of them do train really, really hard and are really into it. And it's wonderful seeing their journeys from people that perhaps had spent a decade sitting in front of a screen playing video games and streaming into being, you know, training like a professional athlete. So that's inspiring as it is. So look, I think everything's got a place. And I think influencer boxing has got a place in this world.
All right. So here is the slow transition into this, the segue, if
What's
you
your
will.
take on it? Just give me your take. Give me your take, Mike, on it. What do you think about it?
So
Interesting to me.
I respect anyone who steps inside a cage, a ring, whatever it may be. If you put in the work to be there, you're there. I feel just personally, and it's not like I have any answers, you know, to fix anything. I feel that in terms of production value and the way in which it's presented to the world, there could be some changes. And then the outside antics, like if we're just there for boxing and to grow as influencers who are trying to box, let's make it that. Let's not have fights ringside. Let's not have fights in the crowd. Let's not have any of that. There are things you can still do to grow your following as a boxer who is mainly an influencer. We see fighters do that in MMA all the time. There's a guy from Ireland who made a pretty good living for himself, not only for what he did inside the ring, because he knew how to talk and he knew how to build a fan base. So I feel like what you would do behind the screen while you're streaming or while you're gaming or running around town making videos is one thing. But if you're there to box, let's just be there to box. Let's leave the antics out of it.
So on that point, I actually think that, well, I think, look, if you're there, you're bringing viewers in because of your brand. People are tuning in to view you because of the brand you've built, wherever it is, streaming or whatever. The boxing side is just sort of the cherry on top of a cake, the intrigue of what's going to happen when this person steps in there. And to your point about them bringing their personas or their personalities from whatever realm they're into boxing, I'll be honest with you, one of the things I found working in that world was one of the toughest things was getting the boxers to do that. I expected when I've stepped into those worlds that these influencers with big personalities online would bring that in and give you big characters and give you big moments in terms of building fights. I actually found a lot of the time they didn't do that. Sometimes these influencers actually think of themselves more as professional boxers than influencers, and that's a challenge because 99% of the time they're not. There's, you know, they're getting paid, I would say, 95% of their purse because of the influence, because of the audience they bring in there and the entertainment value they're perceived to bring, and then a small amount for their boxing acumen. And I think that's fair across the majority of the board. But then I think sometimes these guys see themselves far more as professional boxers and therefore don't engage in that stuff, which then I think, when you look at the companies running these things and trying to put on these shows, they're expecting these big viral moments, and they often don't get that, or don't get as many as they want, which is tough for them. So I've actually found it slightly the other way around, and I know some boxers do go the other way and do have these big moments, but I actually think that influencer world, if you're going to be part of it, you need to leverage your influence to be in there, because again, I think it's entertainment. And that world for me is about engaging the next generation of fans. We see with esports a lot. We see people like Formula One and FIFA. They are investing a lot over the last few years in esports because they're trying to find the next generation of fans. That the teenagers that will grow into the adult fans. That they're not engaging with the sports in the way that a generation or two generations ago did. So engaging in esports is helping bring that next generation through. And I think maybe it's the same with boxing, with the influencer boxing, that they'll go through these stages. The people they've seen online will open the door to them, and you hope some of them then engage and move through the sport, and as fans, as athletes, or whatever.
Well, I hate to do this, especially my first time talking to you. I hate ever admitting I'm wrong, but I was wrong years ago. And I think this is where it comes from, right? Because I really hate having to be like, yeah, I was wrong. This guy knew what he was doing. But Jake Paul paved the way to do it the right way, in my opinion, right? Yeah, build it up. And I'm not saying I'm a huge fan of all his antics, but he's gotten to where he's wanted to go. The Mike Tyson fight, the Mike Perry fight. Matter of fact, like he did it the right way. And I just see too many other outside antics that I'm like, do you guys want to go the Jake Paul route? Or you, like you said, just use boxing as like 5% of what you're really here for? I feel if you're going to do both, go the Jake Paul route.
Look,
Take
Jake's
it.
putting the work. Jake's putting the work. It's undeniable. And I think that undeniable is the word. He's put himself in an undeniable situation. Again, I go back to the point that, this sport as a whole, it's entertainment first and foremost. And I think the people in charge, if there's money to be made from selling that entertainment, they're going to do it. And Jake has proven himself as a draw. He's proven himself as someone who people will tune in to watch. And they will look at his social media, they'll look at who he's fighting, they'll engage with whatever he's doing because he's doing it in a certain way. And I think, yeah, he's the tent pole for that kind of stuff. For me, the influence of boxing, I'm intrigued to see how much more it's got to go. I think Jake is, I wouldn't even call Jake an influencer boxer. I think he's a crossover boxer. He's come from somewhere else, and now, he's gonna box, we all hope, Mike Tyson on Netflix towards the end of the year. He's boxing Mike Perry in a matter of weeks. That's crossover boxing. He's not fighting another influencer. He's fighting real fighters. And that to me is intriguing. And look, he's backed up time and time again. Yeah, it's not been perfect, but he's backed up. He's shown he's put the work in there. So yeah, man, like Jake is, props to Jake. People knock him, and they've got arguments, and we can go back and forth on this all day long. But what he does create is entertainment. He creates engaging moments. We want to see what's happening. Floyd Mayweather himself once said that he doesn't care if people tune in because they're fans or because they want to see him get beat up. As long as they tune in, they pay their pay-per-view money. That's all Floyd cared about. And look where he ended up.
Yeah, he's done quite all right for himself. Now, you're right. It is all forms of entertainment. But one thing there is no place for in MMA and boxing and pro wrestling is, honestly, disgusting athletes who act like Ryan Garcia. And obviously this is a hot topic, right? And we don't have to go too far into it, but okay, so you have this steroid suspension, this PED suspension, and it's obviously taking a toll on Ryan Garcia, who, whatever he was going through leading into the Devin Haney fight, whether it was an act or not, maybe there was a little truth to him struggling outside of training and coming into the fight. But now, he on 4th of July here in the States, he was caught and captured. yelling several, racist comments through to multiple different races. The WEC has basically expelled him from competition when he does return. I mean, this is one of the biggest falls from graces we've seen in combat sports, which is literally the most forgiving sport in any professional sport in the world. How does Ryan Garcia rebound from this? And would you like to see him just go away for a little bit and get himself together and then come back a while from now?
Look, I don't know what's going on inside the Ryan Garcia camp, and if that's a camp of one people or who he's surrounding himself with, or what the reality is. I mean, he said after the fight he was just trolling everyone. That what he was perceiving before his last fight was all BS. The failed test and what you just said that came out recently. I just hope he gets some help. I think we see time and time again, sometimes these athletes who rise to the top, and again, there's so much money involved. They can often be surrounded by people who are just looking to get their slice of the pie and perhaps don't have that person's best interest in heart. I don't know what's going on with Ryan Garcia. I'm not there, I'm not part of him. I see the headlines like all of you guys. But if he is in a bad place and he is making bad decisions, I just hope he gets some help and that people who have his best interest at heart help him. Obviously, he's an incredible athlete. Obviously, he's fantastic boxer. And he's someone who can make a lot of noise for the right or wrong reasons. But I think it's time for him to seek the help he needs and to get himself back into to a good place. And I'd love to see him back in the ring. I'd love to see him doing what we know he can do, which is put on amazing performances. But again, I don't know. But from the outside in, it looks like he's having some troubles. And I wish him the best. And I hope that the people around him do the right thing.
Listen, for my money right now, just my money, I don't need Ryan Garcia. I'm with you because everyone is human, right? You talk about a guy, great, biggest win of his career, then it gets turned over because of the PEDs. Now he's suspended. Now he loses $1 million. Like basically everything was just taken from him, probably because of his own actions. We'll never know for sure, what happened to lead to that failed test. But yeah, he's acting out. 95% of humans would act out if everything they worked for was suddenly taken from them a week or two later. It makes sense. But when you're in that spotlight, just seek help. Don't come back for a while. I'm good on all of that. And if that's how you truly feel about certain races in this country, maybe go away for an even longer time until you. And it's not just a PR tour. You got to really put in the work to come back from that. But
I think there's maybe a problem though as well that like Ryan came through as this social media really helped him.
yeah,
Of course, athletic ability is what got him to the dance, but social media is something that really helped him. And when you've come through a big part of your life utilizing that, it's perhaps ingrained into you. So he's on there a lot. Whether he should be or shouldn't be is another conversation. But yeah, man, look, anyone who you see rising to the top, but then facing struggles, you just want them to get the right help. And I think it's tough for a lot of us to relate. How quickly someone comes through at such a young age, the popularity, the money, the responsibility, all those things that come with huge success. Unless you've been there, I think it's really hard to fully understand what that person goes through. So, I just hope that anyone who's ever in a situation like Ryan just gets the help and gets surrounded by the right people, and can come out the other side of it and do the great things they were put here to do.
well, I think I was asking you because I think you're pretty popular and you've obviously had a lot of success, right? So who better to talk about a rise to stardom than Andy Shepard himself, right?
Oh, what a segue! What a segue!
On a lighter note, one reason, not only because I respect all the work you've done in the business, that I was excited to talk to you is, yeah, Salt Lake City was my first PFL show. Anyone who's followed my work on the several websites that I write for, and my YouTube channel, they know it's been PFL and Bellator all 2024. That's literally all the interviews I've done. I've been doing those interviews for a while. PFL, I just really kicked them off. I don't know whether I got hit over the head one night while I was sleeping or what happened, but just the injection of interest and enjoyment and love that I have for the PFL is one of one, because now I'm getting fired up. We're talking July 5th. We have PFL MENA in a week from now, right? You're in the UK. PFL Europe is massive. I would cut off my left foot to be able to go overseas and cover a PFL event or a
You
Bellator.
haven't got a cut up a limb, Mike. I'm sure there's ways to get you over a screen.
But just because I have a infatuation with not only the UK, I've always told like the people behind the scenes, especially at Bellator, like a Bellator Dublin show would be the second greatest day of my life outside of getting married one day. Like that, like I honestly, you take the NFL Super Bowl away from me for the next 5 years if I could go to a Bellator Dublin show. Just the energy, the history, the stories, the fighters, the crowd. But these PFL, and this is what people need to understand. These are leagues, right? We have the PFL Global League, which we see throughout the year. The playoffs are starting in August. We have the PFL Europe League, where we've seen two stars, Jacob Neto, move over to Global. Dakota Ditcheva, she's on a tear. Now we have PFL MENA, Middle East, North Africa. It's a league. These things are severely important to the growth of PFL because they are going to corner the markets worldwide and they're going to find the talent and they're going to reward the talent. As someone who works there, how important are these other leagues like Europe, like MENA?
Massive, massive. Literally, just before I jumped on this call with you, I've been doing some prep for the PFL MENA event. Me and Stefan Struber calling that show in English in a week's time. These shows are massively important. First of all, I think the league format, I think it's super intriguing. Look, we know what other MMA organizations do. We know what the UFC do. They have fights. And then, the fights are determined, okay, maybe this is a number one contender fight, or however you want to do it. There's a certain people can make the fights they want to make. Okay. When you come into PFL, like the global season, for example, you have to earn, you have to put together a body of work. It's not about one fight. It's not about getting booked for that fight and performing well in that one fight. You have to put together a body of work over an entire season. And that, to me, why it's so intriguing. The second half of the regular season just wrapped up. And on the global season, that for me is, I think, apart from the championship, the most intriguing time. Because really, for the only time, an MMA fight is not just about winning or losing. There are so many different permutations and so many different things you have to think about going into fights because it's about amassing points, isn't it? It's the people with the four athletes with the most points will progress on to the playoffs, and then the winners will go on to the finals. How you win is so important. We saw it several times. A fighter, he might have won his fight, but because he didn't win it in the first round, he didn't progress. And because he didn't do so well in the opening round, that mathematics stuff, that's what I love. Those entire three events, just watching that all unfold, it's very unique. And of course, our champions. When you get to the championship, you win on the global level, you win the title, and you win $1 million. First of all, life-changing. Life-changing because you're now a world champion. Life-changing because you've won $1 million. Hey, look, I've been to Sean O'Connell's house. I've seen what that $1 million can do. Okay, but truly, it allows. And you know this from talking to athletes. It allows these athletes to have a cushion to provide for their families, to really focus, and if they aren't already, just to put their all into mixed martial arts. It's a game changer, an absolute game changer. I think that PFL Global title is certainly recognized up there with the best titles in the world. You see what Renan Ferreira's done. We see what he did to Ryan Bader earlier this year. He is a force to be reckoned with. We hope we get that Francis Ngannou fight soon. Impa Kasanganay is another one who, we saw, this is a guy who went from a viral sensation for the wrong reasons to coming into the Challenger season last year to having just incredible performance after incredible performance. I think his performance against Josh in the finals last year, the way he controlled his gas tank. I mean, me and the broadcast team were all talking afterwards. How did Impa was barely breaking a sweat at the end of that fight, and he was just putting the pace on. It was incredible. He took Johnny Eblen to the absolute limit in the champs versus champs thing. I mean, our champions are second to none. So that's the global scene. But then you look at these regional scenes. I think it's been proven time and time again that fans want to back their own. I mean, here in the UK, look, we got Tom Aspinall. We got Leon Edwards across in the UFC. There's a huge guffaw around them. Brendan Loughnane in the PFL, Dakota as well. There's a lot of fandom for them over here. And you need to build those stars. You need to identify them. You need to give them the platform. And that's what PFL Europe did and continues to do. Of course, look at Dakota. She's had a great run on the global scene so far. She's going to be up there. I mean, I think saying that she wins the global title this year, that's not fantasy. That's something that genuinely could happen. And on those performances, she's going to be a force to be reckoned with. And then you go to Mina, which has just started this year. And again, I've talked to a bunch of the fighters this week about their upcoming fights. And I think that the thing that almost all of them say to me time and time again is how proud they are, how fortunate they feel to be in the PFL ecosystem, because they know coming to PFL Mina, they know the schedule. They know what they've got to do. It's not, hey, have a fight. And then if you win that one, we'll see. Maybe you'll get another one. Maybe you won't. When you get a title shot, we'll decide later down the road. No, this is about earning your opportunities. If you're in the season, win. You win your regular season back. You move forward. You win your playoff fight. You move into the championship. You win that. Oh, baby, you get 100 grand and you get a regional championship. And then opportunities, man. Like, again, now being in this PFL ecosystem, look, hey, maybe you want to stay in the MENA season one more year. Give yourself another go there. Challenge the best in your region. Maybe you want to go to the Bellator Champion Series and compete there and have those one-off fights. Or maybe you want to go to the global scene and test yourself against the best in the world. But the career development and the possibilities that come with being part of these systems, as well as building that fan base and building that notoriety, man, I think it's so good. And again, all the MENA guys, as they're saying, how much the sport is developing in popularity, in terms of resources in their regions, and partly because of PFL, because they're coming in there and going, look, here's the trajectory. It's very hard in professional sports to have a career path, shall we say. There's no, okay, you're coming as an intern in the mailroom and then you work your way up. It's tough. In PFL, you do enough to get recognized, you get into the season, you can earn your way to major opportunities.
I absolutely agree. And you said it best. For me, shameless plug here, I talked to Mohammed Alikar going into PFL MENA, and he was like, I'm the best in the Middle East, and PFL MENA provides me the opportunity to show that. And this is a guy who's 5-0. And we'll see, obviously, right? But at 5-0, people who are saying that, Dakota coming into PFL Europe, saying that she believes she's one of the best in the world, that these are launch pads to the next level. And you talked about, champions being second to none. One thing I really wanted to get your take on is, for my money, PFL is so much of fighter first promotion, right? So what I mean by that is, you can look at, we'll use the UFC. There are so many fighters that when they finally climb that mountaintop and they get over that hill and they become a world champion, it's like, insert fighter's name here, okay? Alex Pereira. Alex Pereira is the light heavyweight champion. Maybe Alex Pereira coming in Glory Kickboxing would do 20 interviews with the media. As soon as he gets that UFC world title, he's doing 2. And they better be the best 2 you got in your media circle. Where PFL, not only, it's not just on my side, speaking of how many interviews we can have with champions, but PFL goes, not only are you a world champion, you represent us, we represent you. And that $1 million grand prize, not only is it life-changing for you, but the man you mentioned, Impa Kasanganay. Here's a man who does so much in his day-to-day operation of life that he's not only a MMA world champion, but he's using the resources he was able to obtain by becoming PFL world champion, the notoriety, the money, the everything, to expand Impa the brand worldwide, open a gym, do so much. That's severely important, rather than just going, all right, we got a shiny new champion, we're going to dictate his future. The PFL goes, let's work together for your future.
Yeah, look, first and foremost, I'm definitely not going to knock the UFC. I've worked with the UFC extensively over the last 10 years in a number of capacities. They're great at what they do. And, when someone like Pereira gets to that point, maybe he only wants to do 2 interviews. I mean, this is training, and, they're such a, have so much exposure. Perhaps they don't want to go and do 2 interviews. I don't know. But again, UFC are great. When it comes to PFL, as we talked about earlier, there's no denying, this is a brand that's growing. This is a brand that's in a huge growth era. And look, you look at Don Davies and Pete Murray and what they're doing behind the scenes to grow this thing. Man, those guys are just hungry, So they know that, and the whole team know that this is a brand about exposure. About, look, some people still call MMA UFC. Oh, what do you train? Do you train UFC? That's the world we're in. And I think, the guys at the PFL want to change that. This is mixed martial arts. This is a sport, and there can be a number of players there. And PFL, want to be up there. They are up there. I mean, you look at the TV ratings in the States, they're really, really good. And as a product, I think everyone would agree it's a really great product to go and watch and to watch on TV. But But again, they know that they need to keep growing their brand. So one of those things is probably giving access to the fighters, giving access to everyone that the journalists that you guys want. And Impa's a fine example. Look, Impa doesn't take any of this stuff for granted. We talked earlier about, where he came from, about the harrowing, moment he had in the UFC and how that affected him, and what he achieved last year, going from being a member of the Challenger Series to winning it all, and he's looking to do it again this year. Impa, I mean, 1 week out after his fight, and he got a cut, he got a nasty cut on his eye. He was cage side the following week. He will be there. If there's an opportunity for Impa to talk to the press, to do something to help out, to help expand the PFL brand, MMA as a whole, or the Impa brand, he's going to do it because he knows what's going to come with that. It makes him a bigger star. And that's what PFL's doing. PFL's trying to grow stars. Yes, they've acquired people like Francis Ngannou, potentially the best heavyweight in the world. But we want to grow stars. I think Impa is certainly one of those ones. You got Dakota. I mean, she's already a star. If she goes on to win the global series, what's next for her? Who knows? Kayla Harrison, she's if you follow MMA, you knew who she was, and she's gone on to the UFC and showing that, she's legit. She's legit, So I think that's the great thing about PFL, though, because the brand is growing, it's so aggressively trying to spread the message. Whether you're coming to an event or you're part of the media or whatever, you're going to get access that you're not going to get at other places because of, the way this brand's growing.
Absolutely not. Just a couple more here, and I appreciate you giving me your time today. One thing I truly feel like I enjoy the most about PFL, and I was kind of pointing it out to myself while writing a playoff preview that's coming out, in the coming days, is look at someone like Jenna Bishop. I'm not going to mention her age because you never talk about a woman's age, right? But she's in the later stages of her career. She started MMA late. In 1 year, and less than 10 professional fights, PFL affords her the opportunity to become a world champion in just 1 calendar year. And I think that's massively important, especially here in the States, because when you have the NHL, the NBA, the NFL, Major League Baseball, and everyone's watching the standings and the stats and all of this, that always matters to every American sports fan. Then it should be easy to get with the PFL, with the point system and all of that. You mentioned earlier, just kind of, it's not just about wins and losses. One more shameless plug. After Salt Lake City, when we were talking to Ray Sefo, I said, the celebration of the night in Salt Lake City was Michael Dufort, who lost. PFL is the only fight organization where you're not defined by the result of the night, especially in the second round. Listen, I want to go to every PFL event moving forward, but the first round, maybe I'll take that first round off and only go to the second round, because the electricity in the second round, where guys are waiting, they're watching the clock, they're hoping, and this is guys on the outside, not what we're seeing inside the cage. It's so special to me, just the opportunities that the PFL provides and just the electricity. I feel like American sports fans here in the States need to jump on now, because it just falls in line with everything that a sports fan here is already accustomed to.
Yeah, Mike, I couldn't agree more. I'll be honest with you. Before I got involved with the PFL, the whole point system, I didn't really get, but only because I'd not looked into it. Once you look into it, it's super easy. You win a fight, you get 3 points. You win it in the first round, you get an extra 3 points. That's 6 points, and so on. It's super easy to get involved with. But you talk about, people becoming world champions in a year. There's a lot of politics in combat sports, particularly boxing. You got to fight the right people, but to do that, you got to go through all these politics, jump through hoops, convince promoters, get the fight. Just to get the opportunities is tough. In the PFL, once you're in that season, it's down to you. Once you're in the season, all you got to do is perform. No one can take it away from you. No one can go, oh, actually, you're not going to fight for the title. If you get through the playoffs, you're fighting for that championship and $1 million on the global stage. So it's that body of work. It's not a one-off fight. And I saw a statistic somewhere saying that it's easier to win, I think, a World Cup than it is to win the Premier League. Because the Premier League is over so many games. It's about your consistency throughout the season, whereas a World Cup, it's a much smaller time. You've got to be good for a smaller time, okay? In the PFL, you've got to put together 4 fights at your very best. You've got to be the very best you can be for that entire season. You can't be like, oh, actually, you know, I've hurt my toe, I'm going to miss this fight and come back in a few months' time. No, the dates are set. You're fighting. If you can't fight, cool, you're out. And each and every year, if you want to be the PFL champion, you got to go back. You got to start again. And as you say, it's like, you know, in America, it's like, you know, your NFL, your NBA, all those sports leagues. You got to do it every single year. And for me, that's great because it takes away so much of the politics. Of course, you know, I'm sure there's fighters are sitting here watching this going, yeah, I couldn't get in the league I couldn't get in the season this year. I get it. I get it. But once you're there, it's down to you how well you do. And I think, look, there's a lot of fighters who look at the PFL who don't want to do the season because it's too tough. Fighting that much, fighting 4 fights in such a compressed amount of time is really, really tough. Some fighters want to fight, yeah, maybe once, twice, maybe 3 times a year, 4 times, that weight cut, those camps. I mean, from the last round to the next round in August, I think there's 8 weeks, maybe. That's a
Yeah.
quick turnaround for a lot of people. It's different. It's different. It tests. It's the toughest test in sports. I mean, Randy Couture says that every week. It's the toughest test, and I truly think it is. And it's a true sign of how good you are as a fighter, as an athlete, as a competitor, that you can maintain composure and health and everything else that goes into being a great fighter for that length of time. It's not about one night. It's about the entire season.
Absolutely. Well, when you're having great conversations, time goes a little bit longer than you originally asked for.
Got all
So,
the time, mate. You got all the time in the world. No rush.
well, here, just the one last one on the PFL, right? We've talked about the global markets, the Europe League, the MENA League, but also one thing you mentioned, like, yes, there are some recognizable names. How valuable and how important is it now? Dakota's probably the easiest example, right? Impa's another good example, but we'll say Dakota mainly. How important is it to have not just young talent, but unrecognized talent? I'll use Jenna Bishop as well. You know, maybe not someone who's 22 years old, maybe someone who's 32, but you never heard of them until they got into the PFL. Now it's no longer, well, you know, PFL or Bellator or any other organization is where the veterans who are no longer with the UFC, they've got to go somewhere. No more of that narrative and more of the, who is this person? Oh, they fight here? Oh, I'm tuned in now.
Yeah, I mean, like, of course, let's use Francis as an example. Francis, arguably one of, if not the biggest MMA star out there, alongside the likes of, you know, Connor and John and those people. He's part of PFL, and look, we hope we get to see him fight soon. We all want to see Francis fight in some capacity soon, and we wish him well with everything he's going through. So of course you want to acquire stars, and from a business model, that makes sense because you're trying to buy eyeballs. You're trying to get people to come over and look at your show, and someone like Francis certainly does that. But I also think, yeah, it's important to show that you can create stars. You're not just going to try and buy them from other places and pick them up. And that's the whole purpose of PFL. Yeah, you're going to want to bring people in who are going to help people find the product. But once they're there, you want to show that this is a breeding ground. And okay, it already is. It really, I mean, like, Kayla's an example. Okay, Kayla was an amazing athlete before she came to PFL. Let's not fight that. But, you know, she really grew into being an MMA athlete in the PFL. And now, you know, she has gone over to the UFC and she's doing her thing over there. She's a talent that was bred in the PFL system. I think the champs versus champs event, although, like, yeah, Bellator did very well there. I think some of the performances there, of course, from Henan, who did this thing against Ryan, but also people like Emper. Johnny Eblin is widely regarded as, you know, the best middleweight in the world. And Impa hung with him, and, you know, I think a few of the adjustments may well have got that victory. Hopefully we see a rematch down the road. But I think PFL is already, for people who are really into mixed martial arts, a breeding and showcasing world-class athletes. And, like, it's a matter of time. That's what it is. It's a matter of time of growing these athletes. I think Dakota, you know, you mentioned there, and Impa, and there's, you know, many others as well. I think with time that will come. But, you know, I've seen in the last 2 years how much PFL has grown from, you know, the Challenger series going on, the global series going on, but now we've got the pay-per-view series going on. They've acquired Bellator, they've launched Europe, they've launched MENA, Africa's to come. I'm hearing of multiple other territories to come in the very, very near future. So this thing is like a freight train, and the more eyeballs to get on it, you know, the more recognition these athletes are going to get. And, you know, we could be sitting here again in another 2 years' time, and we could have a whole plethora of undeniable recognizable world champions.
Well, Andy, I want to thank you for your time. Before I let you go, this has been a great conversation. I think this is where a rivalry begins between us, though, because as we talk about the PFL for a second, it is literally the UK versus Chicago at the end of this month in the UFC, with Bilal Muhammad taking on Leon Edwards and Curtis Blades taking on Tom Aspinall. I'm also from Chicago, so hopefully it's not me against you in the future, because I don't want my ass kicked.
I don't know, mate. I think I don't know how well I'm gonna fight you are, but if you come at me, it's gonna be the doggy fight. Really gonna get, my friend.
But how massively important is this night in UK MMA history with Tom Aspinall and Leon Edwards at the top of the marquee?
I mean, it's huge. We've got two. Look, Tom's the interim champ. To me, he's the champ because John has got that championship, but John isn't fighting right now. You know, if those two fighters stepped into the ring now, if John's not fit, Tom wins. That makes Tom the champion. Okay, we can go back and forth on that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But for my mind, Tom is the best heavyweight in the UFC as of today. I think it's a huge card. It's a huge shame the time it's on, because it sucks, man. It sucks. I just think when someone says you're going to get an event in the UK, and particularly a numbered event, man, those, look, come on, they're the prime ones. Hey, then find out the main card. I think the main card starts at 3 a.m. UK time. Oh man, like, you know, as UK fans, you just want to be able to watch it without falling asleep. You know, again, as a WWE fan, when they do the events around the world and I get to watch it in the afternoon or a time that is not 2 o'clock in the morning, it's great. You know, we don't get to consume it like you guys in the States.
Right.
So I think the time is being skewed is tricky. And for me as an MMA fan, it takes the edge off because, again, I want to watch it, but am I going to stay up until 6 in the morning? No, no. I'm going to get up and watch it the next day because it feels in some ways like the event in America because of that time skew. But in terms of what it is for the MMA community in the UK, it's massive. It just shows the growth of the sport over here. I remember hosting some of Tom's early fights in Bama, and he was a prospect. He was a prospect then, but I've got to tell you, I don't think any of us saw him getting to where he is now. I think the way he has grown into the sport, the athlete he's become, he's a modern heavyweight. You know, he's a mixed martial artist. I mean, look, I'm 6'1" and best part of 200 pounds, and I've met Tom a few times. I've got pictures with him, and I look like a child next to him. He's a huge guy, but he moves. He moves like a middleweight. And Leon, oh man, again, Leon and his brother Fabian. I've been around those guys for close to 10 years, seeing what they do, and for a long time, I think all of us in the MMA community was looking at Leon and thinking, man, is he going to get the opportunity? He kept getting overlooked time and time again. And that's one of the challenges with being in big organizations like that, where decisions are made on, you can't just earn that. Again, we go back to the PFL. You're in the season, you win your fights, you get the points, you go through, blah, blah, blah. You earn it once you're there. With Leon, overlooked time and time again, but when he got the opportunity, man, he lived up to it. And I think he continues to do so. And I think that confidence that being a champion has instilled into him has done him the world of good. And I'm so pleased for everything he's achieved and will hopefully continue to achieve. So yeah, man, in short, having that Manchester card, having a numbered event, and those two at the top of the table, and not just because of their names, but because of the gold they have around their waists. Oh man, it's huge. It's huge. And I think it just shows the sport's popular here in the UK, of course it is, but I think it shows how hard the people working in the sport are working over here to develop the skills, to develop the talent. And I just hope that that there's some youngsters out there who are looking at this and thinking, oh wow, maybe I want to do that. And we see the next generation come through, and these guys are inspiring more and more champions of the future.
Yeah, well, the next generation, I have a stopping point for them, and it'll start at PFL Europe whenever they get ready to throw their gloves on. Because
Dan Hardy's looking. I tell you what, I spent time with Dan Hardy. I see his phone going off constantly. People sliding into his DMs, messaging him, trying to get people on those cards. Dan is one of the I love Dan Hardy, one of the best analysts in the world, one of the great talent finders, coaches, whatever you like. You know, he's so valuable to mixed martial arts as a whole, and to have him here in the UK helping talent develop and getting them onto these cards and giving them a route to follow. Yeah, man. Dan is opening a lot of doors, and I hope providing a fantastic future for a lot of people over here in Europe.
A lot of those DMs are me just trying to say hi and get responses.
And me won't actually give me his phone number, so I have to slide into him.
Andy Shepherd, the voice of the PFL, a man who can do it all in combat sports. This has been a great conversation. I can't thank you enough for the time and the opportunity. Listen, PFL playoffs are right around the corner. PFL MENA is about a week's time away. Business is booming in the PFL. Business is booming for you, and I'm happy to be very, very, very small part of the action with the PFL. So it's
great to have you. It's great to have you along. It's great to have you on board. And look, thank you for this opportunity to talk to you. It's always great to shoot the people on this, man. So look, it's great, man. Like look, we appreciate all you guys of all that cover the sport and cover PFL, and you're part of the ecosystem that is helping spread this sport. And as we said earlier, that's what PFL is doing, man. PFL is in such a growth stage right now, and you're a big part of that. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. So it won't be annoying when I do have to cut off a limb to go to the UK, and I ask you for a tour, right? Because I've never been out of the States.
Look, talk to Tawny, because maybe you could do it without cutting off a limb. Because I tell you what, I've got a young kid, so I know how tough it is to get around London in a wheelchair or a pram. So try and keep your limbs. Yes, when you come to London, my friend, I will show you around. I'll show you some good spots.
The funniest thing is, before Salt Lake City, I had never been west of Illinois. So here in the States. So that was like my first West Coast trip. And I was like, wow, there are mountains and there are beautiful scenes and views all around this country. It's not just skyscrapers and loud cities like Chicago. So Andy Shepherd, thank you so much. You guys can follow him on all social media. Subscribe to his YouTube channel as well. And I'm going to say this. We need more YouTube content out of you. We need more.
I'll try. Look, I'd love to do more YouTube content.
I know you're busy. I know you're busy.
It's great, man. Maybe you'll keep me up the ass and I'll do some more. But yeah, man. Look, yeah, it'd be great to always appreciate the follows and the engagement from the MMA community. They're a great bunch of people.
Thank you, Andy.
Take care, Mike.